My guest this week is Steve Wynn. Steve is a founding member of the Dream Syndicate, whose debut album, The Days of Wine and Roses, is widely regarded as a cornerstone of the indie alternative rock scene of the 1980s. He's also enjoyed a prolific solo career, touring the world on a regular basis, and performing and recording in groups such as Danny and Dusty, Gutterball, and The Baseball Project, also featuring R.E.M. founders Mike Mills and Peter Buck. He also scored 2 Norwegian hit TV shows, Dag and Exit, and his songs have been covered by Luna, Yola Tango, and Concrete Blonde, among others. I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True is his first book, and he lives in New York City. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to Revolutions per Movie, Steve Wynn. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Chris. Nice to be here with you.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I want to thank you for coming on for many reasons. One is that you picked an incredible film to talk about, The TAMI Show from 1964. But also, I get to bug you about your life in Dream Syndicate and your book and the documentary before we get into that. And I just wanted to ask you some stuff off the top from the book. You say in it that, at the age of 9, you got your first guitar, you wrote your first song, started your first band, did your first gig. Knowing you, it doesn't surprise me because you seem like the most confident person in music I've ever met, and also the most excited to be like, let's go, let's do this, let's get on stage, let's have a good night. Have you always had that within you to kind of like get things together and kind of lead the charge?
It's funny you say that. And there was a review of my book, and somebody who I didn't know wrote about it, and kind of took me to task because in the book he said, early on he being me, says he's very, very shy, which I consider myself to be. And then a couple chapters later, he talks about all these things he did. So he's kind of lying because how could he be shy and do that? But they do, as I'm sure you can relate to, and I'm sure a lot of people who are musicians and creative people can relate to, you can be on the one hand shy, which is just another word for being receptive to so many things. That's why you write and create, because you're just, a magnet, an antenna for things around you, which can make you overwhelmed sometimes. At the same time, you can be really driven, to do your thing, which is how things get done. And I have been both, So have I always been that way? Well, as I talk about in the book, I'm an only child. I was a bit of a loner, so I didn't, necessarily play well with others because I didn't even deal with others for a lot of my childhood. But once I started actually doing bands, I just had that mindset of this has got to get done, and I'll be the one to put that in motion. And you've been in enough bands now, and you're in a band now where you have a lot of people. Well, definitely you and John who are leader types, so it's great to have. We've also been in bands where there's one person making it all happen.
Right.
And when you're the person, you're at once you're kind of heroic because you're the one who gets it all done. You're also kind of the lightning rod for everybody else to bitch at. Like why are you doing that? Oh, I didn't say yes to that. Like, well, hey, I'm just trying to get things going. So yeah, in a short answer to or let's say already a long answer to your question, yes. As far as bands, I've always been that way, and without thinking I was actually being a busy bee or being that, I just doing what I had to do to keep doing it.
It is funny in the book. It kind of leads into this next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the confidence to basically hop on a bus and travel to try to track down Alex Chilton and kind of like befriend him and kind of annoy him and just like be like, hey, do you know where he hangs out? Like, that is such a beautiful mindset to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to go on a journey. I'm just going to go track him down. Do you remember like what the thinking of about that? Like what you thought about on your bus ride there, and also what you felt like leaving?
That's a great way of putting it. That's a interesting question right there. What was I thinking about the bus ride? It just all seems so inevitable. I can't, a lot of things caused me to do that. One that, now bear in mind, this is 1981 at a time when, most people didn't know what a big star was, or, if they knew what an Alex Chilton was because they knew the box tops, so it was kind of just an obsession of mine. And I thought only mine, but although it turns out there were people all around the country, people you and I both know, your producer for one, Peter, and who were feeling the same way that wherever they were, that, hey, I'm also the only one but I was so obsessed and felt it was kind of my band. And I talk about this in the show, how when you're young, it's exciting to have a band you think is yours and yours alone. that nobody else is into. Now in the internet age, we find out, oh, people are into all kinds of stuff. When in those times, you might be into a band and think nobody knows this band except me, and that's my. So that was the band for me, and so going out to find Alex somehow seemed like an inevitable thing. Adding to the reason was at the time, well, I was 21, kind of disenchanted with school and looking for something, I don't know what, and a music fan, but also I remember the Greyhound bus, they had a deal, I think it was $200 for unlimited travel for the entire summer. So that
Wow.
also kind of set me in motion. Like,
Yes.
well, good time to do something like that, and I'll just go to New York City and
Right.
Nashville and other places as well. $200, stay in youth hostels or YMCA's or whatever. And I just did that. So I think the Chilton thing was kind of the main motivator. But when I think about that now, and I write about that a lot in the book, and I talk about it in the show I'm doing quite a bit, it's just like I said, I don't know what I was thinking. What a crazy thing to do. I don't know what I was thinking to not only do that, but get off the Greyhound at 9 in the morning in Memphis, travel to an address that I found on the back of a record, the first record by the Pantherburns. So all I knew was the Pantherburns was a band that had Alex because I'd read about that in New York Rocker. To go to that address at 9 in the morning and knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'm Steve from Los Angeles, and I'm here to find Alex Chilton," only to find out the guy who answered the door at 9 in the morning and dressed to the nines, by the way, at 9 in the morning, was Tav Falco, who said,
That's
"Well,"
amazing.
who said, "Well, he doesn't live here, but I can take you where he drinks." And that began the whole thing. What balls I had.
The great thing about the book is you're getting insights to things that really not only define you, but all the music you've made. There's another great sequence where you and Kendra Smith, friends before even Dream Syndicate starts,
Sure.
you're talking about the four elements to make a great record. You got sexy, get it, funny, which is often not appreciated enough, scary, but the thing that I feel like defines so much of what you do is the last one. It can fall apart at any moment, which I feel like is a totally underappreciated thing in music. That is my favorite kind of music. Mission to Burma, Butthole Surfers, Dream Syndicate, things that just feel like they're going to topple, but they're in control too. What were some of your favorite things that were musically falling apart that influenced you?
Well, and those four benchmarks still, I think, still hold up today for things that those four. That really was. I mean, Kendra and I would spend hours analyzing our entire record collection based on, okay, that one has three of them, that one has four of them, and that was a big thing. And you're right, the fall apart thing was such a big thing. It's not just because an aesthetic of, oh, I like things that are, because it wasn't the same as sloppy. It
No.
didn't mean sloppy. What it meant was, well, two things. It meant the band's just losing their shit. It just means, there's somebody somewhere in a room is just, the wheels are about to fall off, and I'm there to witness that. And also, the thing which I really love in music that you don't always get is the feeling that what you're listening to happened in a moment that could never happen that way again. It happened that one time. You're a witness to it. You listen to Kind of Blue, and say, "Oh, yep, that really did happen in one day," and or I think it was 2 days. Records like, even though we know Exile on Main Street took a long time, was a sloppy, painful birth. It feels like this happened, and you're getting the chance to see. You're flying the wall. You're seeing this happen. I love that. So that's kind of the whole thing about things to fall apart. At the time we started the Dream Syndicate, probably the band that embodied that the most in the current time. And we would look back at the Velvet Underground, of course, and other bands who had that element. But at that time in 1981, when we were starting, was the Fall, and the Fall were just so amazing that way. Even in the context of punk rock and new wave in 1981, even more than if you listen to, for example, even the first Clash album, it sounds pretty rehearsed. It sounds like a band that spent a long time learning those songs and playing great. It's wild and raucous, but the Sex Pistols album is structured and manicured to the
It's
nines.
tight.
It's tight. Whereas the Fall sounded like, boy, not only could it fall apart, it was falling apart half the time. And I love that. Like, oh my God, these
Yeah.
guys are maniacs. What is going on? Hearing records that can fall apart at any moment make you wish you could be in that room, or maybe in the room, but a little not too close because they are crazy. Bo Diddley records sound like, wow, that's just what's holding that together. It's great.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I wanted to ask you about your song "Tell Me When It's Over." I finally get to ask this because Dennis, your drummer, is
Hmm.
He's so reliable. He's so sturdy and steady and exciting. But that song speeds up. And was that on purpose, or was that youthful excitement of just capturing it and being like, now it's up here?
I didn't know it speeds up.
It totally does. It's amazing. You guys started and it's pretty relaxed. And then it's like, all right, now we're kind of on it. It's really cool.
That must be part of the reason it works. I did not know that.
Yes, I jumped around. I didn't write the RPMs down, but I did definitely like clock it. I was like, I'm not.
I wonder if Dennis knows that.
It's so cool. But to me, it feels like more what we're talking about. It just felt right. And everyone is just feeling it. And you were a band and still are a band that plays off each other. I mean, you've worked with so many incredible guitar players, and you are one yourself. But like we mentioned, Carl, and you've got Jason Victor, and Paul was in it. Paul Cutler, Peter Buck. I've seen you so many times. I've toured with you, and it is never really the same every night with you.
I'd like that to be the case. Yeah, that should be it.
And it is true. It is true. So tell Dennis, check it out.
I will. Well, we were all so excited, and I think the excitement comes off in that, and also I talk about this in the book, and I'm not saying this is the reason why that happens, but it's an interesting thing. And I wonder if you had the same experience. But I remember making that first record and never feeling this way again, ever again in the studio. But on that record, feeling like, I hope we make it to the end. It's like first verse, first chorus, second verse, second chorus. We're getting there. We might make it. Don't screw up, for God's sake. And it doesn't mean we weren't fully abandoned in the moment, but at the same time, especially because this is obviously pre-computer, before Pro Tools. This is just tape and a limited budget and limited time frame. And there was that feeling of, oh my God, this sounds so good and it's going so well. If this fucks up in the last minute, I'm going to be so disappointed. So maybe there is a little bit of that adrenaline, knowing we're reaching the finish line and how great this is. We're almost there. Just give it the sprint for the last 20 yards of the dash. I don't know. It could be any of that. I never felt that way, and I never felt that way again. By the way, I don't. Did you ever feel that way in your making your first? You probably didn't, because you were already in the age where you could fix things so easily.
No, that's not true. I first recorded my punk band was like on a Mystic Records comp, right?
In 1985.
Right.
That's right. You go, Chris, I forget.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then when we recorded at Smart Studios on Sub Pop, it was like they were splicing mistakes out with razors, right?
You did that. Wow. Yeah.
But I do remember even recording with Guided by Voices, it was always under rehearsed. And that's what made it exciting, was like, keep the mistakes in, keep the tempo that kind of went sideways in. And I do have an affinity for that. And I think we both work with Peter Buck. He's the same way. He's like,
oh yes,
don't make this time stamped. Make it sound like it's for the ages. And he's often like, the take that you're like, oh, that's the most secure one. He's like, I kind of like the third take better. And you listen to it and he's right. There was like something that he just could tell. And I think that's just kind of, maybe from that element of being like, we got all the way through, next song.
I will say Peter in the studio is probably as good as anybody I've worked with in the studio. He has such a sense and such a quick instinct for what needs to happen on a record and what's good and what's not. And I think he and I are somewhere in this. He's great in the moment and that quick instinct. And once things get bogged down, it's not as good. If you trust your judgment, if you're well, I say for me as well, and probably for you, you're better off, because let's face it. Look at your room right now. Look at this podcast. You have great taste. You work in the coolest video store. I look at behind me. I've got my library back there. We know what's good and what's not, and this goes back to the four elements, the four classic elements: the scary, the funny, the sexy, the fall apart thing. We really know our rock history, and the fact of the matter is, most people we admire did as well. That's the thing is kind of not talked about it as often as it should be. Is being a snobby know-it-all archivist is what made a lot of people great. It's what made the Stones great. It's what made the Beatles great. It's what made Dylan great. They were all snobby know-it-all archivists. And that's why you kind of say, that's good and that's not good. And that's all that matters. And I know better than you do what's good and what's not good. And that kind of confidence really is a great thing to bring into the studio. we're probably you're more of a movie buff. I mean, I love movies, and I should say I'm a movie buff, but not like you are, I'm sure. But I think certain directors are like that too. Well, yeah, Martin Scorsese has seen every movie in history, and will tell you why that one's good and why that one's not. Or Quentin Tarantino, who could have been you, we're working in a video store, and said, that it's great. It's great having that knowledge.
You mentioned it in your book, and those directors liberally steal all the time from
Yeah.
things they love. And in your book, you talk about, oh, I could tell you every song that influenced, every song on these first couple records, but I was never close enough. It was just my idea of like, oh, this is kind of what it is. And I love that. I do that too. I'm just like, no one knows that this is kind of what I'm referencing, but it's a historical touchstone for me to kind of like be like, oh, I've never written a song like that, and I love this song. How can I make something like that mine?
That's great. That's a really good thing to do, and it's great when nobody busts you because you had the
Yes.
inspiration. But by the time it filters to the band, people can't tell. I do a thing in my show, and I'm not going to say the specific because it's more fun when you don't know. But I do a thing on my show because the show I'm doing right now is kind of a reading, storytelling, and music tour that I'm on right now. And I take one of my songs and I show very specifically where I stole it from and
Yes.
how I stole it,
Yes.
and it's fun. And when I get to the song of mine after showing first the song I stole from, when I get to my song, I can always feel a gasp in the audience when it's almost like a magic trick when I say, and voila, there's that song you've heard a million times by me, and you had no idea. It's
Yes.
fun. It's fun to do that.
And that happens in the TAMI show at some point. There's something in it that will, as listeners, you'll have to go side by side to hear it. Before we started recording, we were talking about my parents actually, and how they're doing and stuff. And I mentioned that I saw you open for R.E.M. on Medicine Show was your new album, and they were on Reckoning. My parents, me and my brother were down in front. My parents were in the balcony seeing the show, and they were like, we won't talk to you. It's cool. We know it's not cool, but they wanted to see it. They were like,
Yeah.
But I remember, it's so funny because the language of the Medicine Show was already, there's hints of it on your early records, but it was like, I was almost too young to understand what you were doing. And you know what I mean? Like 15 and being like, oh, this is different than what I have at home. And now I'm just like, it just sounds it just sounds fine. It was like, it's not a difficult listen. It's not that big a stretch. But I like that in your book, you go through all the different chapters of where you were personally in different parts of your life and working with all these incredible producers and their different demands and your demands. I just remember seeing you. First of all, I thought your haircuts were incredible. It was so weird. Dennis's and Carl's hair just like cut really tight at the top and then long on the side. It's total look. And I was like, are they brothers? What's going on? But there was a definite feel to what you guys were doing that I had not experienced from a band yet. Like I understood when R.E.M. came out what they were giving. Dream Syndicate was a complete mystery to me. Did you feel that? Like at times, because you do mention in the book that out of the gate you guys were like popular and it wasn't like you had to work that hard in LA to get a scene. But what did it feel like when you're trying to go where you want and maybe the audience just is a little behind, for a better lack of word?
Yeah, I mean, because when we put out Days of Wine and Roses, our first album, I wouldn't say everybody was with us because we were still underground. We weren't like we weren't challenging Toto for the top of the charts by any means, but we were very much unanimously loved by the scene that we were part of. The college rock or whatever you want to call it really just took to us so well. And as has always been the case my whole life, I just make the music I want to make and go where I want to go. And I don't want to do the same thing twice. So we gravitated towards the Sound of Medicine Show. I always wish there would have been a record between Days of Wine and Roses and Medicine Show because the evolution from A to B was very natural. The time in between didn't show the steps. And we're doing actually, there's going to be a Medicine Show box set coming out next September.
Oh, amazing.
And because it's been out of print for a long time because it was a whole nightmare with, not with A&M Records because they long since got swallowed up by eventually Universal.
Oh, right.
Without getting too much into it, there's just been a big messy legal battle that finally got resolved last year. We own the rights to Medicine Show now, so we're putting it out as a box set. But the box is going to pretty much show how we got there.
Oh,
It's
that's
going
so
to have
cool.
a lot of rehearsal tapes, a lot of live tapes, a lot of things that kind of show you, well, to get from Days of Wine Roses to Medicine Show, you passed through all this, and then to get where we were by the time you saw us as Starry Nights, we evolved even further to this other thing we became at that point. And I have to say, on that tour you saw, being out there for opening for R.E.M. When I hear back those shows now, I love them. I love what we were doing on that tour. It mystified a lot of their audience because a lot of their audience, A, obviously loved R.E.M., who were, at that point, the standard bearer for that scene, but also loved the Days of Wine and Roses. So they were, come on, hey, let's go. Where's Kendra?
Well, and your versions were very different too. Like by
Boy,
this
were they.
point, you'd be like, oh, like a minute in, you'd be like, oh, they're playing Halloween. Okay, But that's what you've always done with the Dream
Yeah,
Syndicate.
yeah,
I mean, even your later records, you stretch wherever you want to go. And I think now, like, of course, you make the leaps and you get it as a listener. But it was funny. I think it was also my youth and my lack of understanding those influences that you're going towards, and why you would pick the producer of Blue Oyster Cult, who I didn't know at that point except for
oh yeah,
their one hit. And now it's like, of course, oh my God, Sandy Pearlman, of course, that's brilliant,
yeah,
But in the book, it's so great. You've got things about people hopping out of the van and going into the desert and just, where you are now. And I can't highly recommend it enough. I don't want to give too much away. And I will also put your tour dates and where you can get the book in the show notes. The TAMI Show is interesting, the film you picked up, because in your book, you say that the film Woodstock was a big influence in you, and you said, oh, I want to do
mm,
this. Me watching the TAMI Show makes me go, I could never be a musician. Like, it's at such a high level. They almost
yeah,
seem like gods in this film.
yeah,
And it's a film from 1964. If people don't know, that was like a live compilation show. Like people would do a series of songs and their hits. And, everything from the Stones, James Brown, you've got Chuck Berry, Leslie Gore, Beach Boys. It's all over the place. And we'll get into all the beats of it and who played. But when did you first come across this film?
I think when I say I felt I could do this, I have to clarify by saying I just saw the magic of what it was like to actually play live music and say that looks like the best thing to ever do. So I think that Tammy would have that same feeling. I came across this probably in the early '80s. I think not like other things where I found it. It was, as we know, and we'll talk about. This was a hard one to find. Actually, before we did
Yes.
the show, I started researching and I realized why that's the case. And I guess I'm getting the name right now. I did keep notes here, but the guy who's kind of the producer of the thing after the show sold off the rights piecemeal left and right.
You could get it on a VHS tape, and Chuck Berry would introduce it,
Yes,
and it would
yes,
cut up the TAMI Show and the sequel to this, which was called the Big
TNT
TNT
show.
Show. And that's all I had at the video store, for years.
I was going to ask you that. Okay, this I was going to ask you what you had. You had that too. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's all I had, and I didn't, they don't say this is two shows, and it was very hard to find out about, this pre-internet, so it's like hard to figure out, what the hell this is.
yeah.
But then eventually they did get the rights back, and they started putting it out separately, and oh my God, it is just incredible. It's shot at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Have you been there?
So I was born 10 blocks from the Santa Monica Civic.
Oh, wow.
I was born in Santa Monica. I went to high school just down the road. I did read that the audience at the Tammy Show is largely from Santa Monica High School, and that was our rival school. I went to University High School down the street. So this is really my turf. I saw the second concert of my entire life at age 11. I saw the Beach Boys at the Santa Monica Civic,
Wow.
and in fact opened for the Psychedelic Furs with the Dream Syndicate in 1982 there. So I have a nice relationship. And one thing I also love, just at my Santa Monica Civic stories, and I know I'm kind of going sideways here, is there's a great book written by my friend Sal Maida, who was in Roxy Music and Sparks and Cracker as well. And he wrote a great book, his memoir. It's an incredible story. And Sal's book begins, he starts, we usually write these books, you sometimes start with a story that sets you up. And the story he writes about is being in Sparks playing New Year's Eve at the Santa Monica Civic in 1977 with Van Halen as the opening band. And
What?
so it's a great story. And he was playing with Sparks. I told Sal, I said, that show, I was standing outside the Civic with my ear to the door because I couldn't afford a ticket. So I stood there listening to your entire set from outside. So yeah, that was I could relate to Sal's story about that.
I did want to ask you about LA because this is, this is where the industry was at the time. This is where, Capitol and all the major, labels and recording studios were. I mean, I did want to ask you about Dream Syndicate. Do you feel like that band could have happened in any other city?
We were a product in LA only in that we found a cool scene there with the Pasiley Underground band, the Bangles and Rain Parade, and the Salvation Army, Bangs and Salvation Army, who became 3 o'clock. So that did, yeah, it happened there because of that scene. But at the same time, I think if we would have been in Athens or Minneapolis or New York or anywhere playing the music we were playing, I don't think being in LA and
Okay.
there's something I say all the time. A lot of people I know, a lot of people, in my that cross paths with over the years who were musicians in LA, came from somewhere else to make it in LA, and their perception of LA, their reality of LA is the industry because I'm here to make it work.
Right.
I'm an LA native. Actually, weirdly enough, you mentioned that when I talk about the Bangs or Salvation Army in particular, they're all native Angelenos. I think every member of both of those bands, every member of the Dream Syndicate, more or less, Kendra and Carl were from San Diego, Santa Barbara, but basically Southern Californians. None of us had any sense of music as the industry. I did work in record stores, so I knew, what was going on, but we didn't think that way.
You didn't feel like an omnipresence of like, oh, I'm in the city where the magic happens.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, not
Okay.
at all. Not at all. Whereas in the TAMI show, obviously, something about that going now, and I think the first time I encountered the TAMI show, I have a really good memory, by the way, and that helped me write the book, but I'm not sure about this, but I think there was a midnight showing or some late showing at, I believe, the New Art Theater, the art house in LA. And I believe all these Paisley Underground people were there. I think it's one of those things where they showed it and you had all of your Susanna Hoffs and Vicky Petersons and Michael Quercios. And I think we all saw it in the presence of each other for the first time. And it was exciting. Yeah, because that was the stuff we love. And it was amazing. And the thing is, I mean, there's so much to say about this movie, and I feel like I don't know how much we'll get into because we could talk about this all day long. But I mean, it's astounding. Several things. It's amazing when I watch this now, and I hadn't seen it in a while, and I watched it last week. It's amazing, one, how integrated the show is, how it at a time before the Voting Rights Act, when this is completely, you know, white bands, black bands, soul music, pop music, proto garage music, the audience too. It's amazing to watch that. Also, how very sexual the show is. The dancers, it's just like, oh my god! Again, I need to turn the AC on, in the middle of winter to make it through this.
Oh yeah, there's nothing better than my favorite look, which is just a long sweatshirt and nothing underneath.
Stunning.
Just the knees down is just bare feet. I'm like,
well, you're in luck in this movie.
oh my god, everyone looks gorgeous in it.
But those two,
incredible.
Those two things, and then finally the third thing, which really struck me that I didn't realize till I saw it again, is once again how everybody is just going for it. I mean, every act on that bill in some way or another, except for maybe Billy J. Kramer, who just kind of freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. With that. Yeah.
But otherwise,
yeah,
everyone, the Miracles, Smokey Robinson, the Miracles are once again losing their shit. They're out of their minds. I mean, holy cow! Everybody's punk rock. Chuck Berry's punk. Jerry and the Pacemakers are punk rock. Everybody is going all out. Even the Stones have. And I kind of struck me how. So not only is it social from a social angle, kind of ahead of its time, from a free love and what happened with the 60s ahead of its time, but the fact bands who up to that point had been kind of taught to kind of stay within your confines, they're just going for it. And it's because it's a TV show, it's because they're all competing with each other. Maybe that's a big part of it. Is it because they're in Los Angeles? I don't know, but no one's playing it safe.
Everybody is like, this is our film to own.
Right.
Like everybody is acting like we are the star. And then the next person comes on and kind of wipes the slate clean. You're like, oh, wait, no, they're the star. And it is interesting that Steve Bender, the director, he did like the 68 Elvis Comeback Special. Yeah. He did everything from like working with Petulia Clark to like doing the Star Wars holiday special.
Oh, wow.
He was really immersed in television specials. And he was very young. And Jack Nietzsche was like the musical director. And then you've got David Winters, who was a choreographer for Hullabaloo, and Tony Basil working on this together. And so everyone is just full of youth, excitement, energy. And it's also shot like at the beginning, it says like it's a theatro film, registered trademark, an Electronovision. They were using like video cameras to capture things in a film way, and to just record it live, right?
Yeah.
And be editing live. So
good too.
Some of the things they capture were complete luck. Like, oh my God, we're so glad we caught that, because if the camera had been focusing on the bass player at this point, we would have missed this incredible moment of James Brown. It does start out weird with a Jan and Dean song about this event.
So funny.
And because Jan and Dean, they don't speak to me. They look like they're 49 years old instead of, they're only 24.
Mm-hmm.
But their song is kind of like setting the tone, and the tone visually is great because you've got like Diana Ross applying lipstick straight into the camera. You've got James Brown, messing with his hair. You've got like Jerry and the Pacemakers on the bus passed out, and it's just got a sense of like, okay, we're all going to the show.
Yeah.
But then the lyrics in it, at one point,
well, I pulled it up here actually.
Yes. Yeah, the mistake that they did. Yeah, no quality control.
Can't you just hear everybody singing the biggest sound you ever heard? A clapping, a stomping with a guitar screaming. You better go spread the word. I mean, where's the mistake?
It says, the Rolling Stones from Liverpool are gonna be there.
That's right. There it is.
Like, you can't, you were in LA. You can't recut this.
God. Those bad-looking guys with the moppy long hair, the Rolling Stones from Liverpool, are bound to be there. During the Pacemakers, Billy J too. They're all going to be here. Oh my God! Yeah, I didn't catch that. It's amazing.
But it's so funny because it just shows also, yes, there were young people involved, but this was an industry, showcase,
right?
Right. And so, yeah, there was nobody minding the store at the same time. No one was like, oh, let's recut that line, because it's going to go out internationally. But yeah, it just cracks me up that Jan and Dean, like, just hearing their voices sing that is so funny. So that Jan and Dean are the hosts.
Yeah. By the way, I watched it with Linda. We talked about before we started. Linda, my wife Linda, who's drummer, of course, in lots of baseball project and lots of bands, and we were both saying, we were both getting down on Jan and Dean. Like, I just never got that. At no time there was no whether
narc energy,
whether it was 60s, 70s, 80s, or now, right? Yeah, narc energy is right. Just never a point where yeah, they drive me nuts, but I like that. No, I've got nothing for them. There's nothing.
Yeah, but it's so killer because right out of the gate they introduced Chuck Berry, and this is a really amazing way to start a show. Yeah. The Godfather of rock and roll, comes out, and he's just on fire. He does Johnny B. Good, straight into Maybelline, and the dancers are surrounding him, and they're just manic, like not like manic. Yeah. Everything is tightly choreographed. But it's also super sharp and whip. They're like their body language is like pop 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 pop, and like they're gonna like have like their spine's gonna fly out of their back.
Yeah.
But the interesting choice about this intro point of the movie with Chuck Berry is they immediately halfway through Maybelline by Chuck Berry, they cut over to
during the Pacemakers doing it. Yeah.
Exactly.
An incredible segue. I kind of watched that segue about 5 times in a row because I was so impressed how Chuck's playing it, and they had the segue seamlessly, not missing a beat where their version comes in, and that was pretty slick.
It's tight, but it's also weird because you can't match Chuck Berry's energy, right? And I think, they keep going back and forth for like 5 or 6 songs. They'll do like 45 seconds, of a Jerry and the Pacemaker song, and then cut back to Chuck Berry doing 45 seconds, then back and forth. But that first transition is tight, but it is weird because at first it kind of like, it brings down the energy a little bit until the Jerry and the Pacemakers are in their own material. Even the ballad works, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, they kind of impressed me. And I'm not, actually, I do like Jerry and the Pacemakers. I'm a sucker for I'm Sorry Across the Mersey. And
Me too.
their hits are, yeah, I've always loved that song. That's a beautiful song. But I was surprised how well they actually came off,
Yeah.
Because like you say, Chuck Berry, Jerry and the Pacemaker, you figure that's going to be TKO in the second round, but somehow they managed to kind of, I think I was talking about earlier, they set that tone. It's like, no, we're, you think we're square? Look at this. And they play, is the title, It's Going to Be All Right. It's going to be all right. And
Yeah, it's great.
They knocked that out
and
of the
even
park.
the ballad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even, what is it? Don't Let the Sun Catch You Crying. Right. It's really cool. And then it cuts over to Chuck Berry, and he just, he's like, all right, well, dig this, and it does work. It's really weird. I was scared at first, when the first time I saw it, because I was like, oh, they feel like, oh, it's a white band covering a black artist's music, and maybe they're saying like, hey, like, look at us, this is where your focus should be in terms of like your money or, the attention, or this is where it's going. But then right away you get the feeling that like, oh my God, you can tell that Jerry and the Pacemakers are psyched to be sharing the stage with Chuck Berry. Yeah. It's like a total respect.
Yeah.
And whenever they cut to Chuck Berry playing, you can see the band behind him kind of not playing because they have to watch him do his thing.
What mystified me, they do that cutaway wall. I forgot which Chuck Berry, maybe it was Nadine, whatever song towards the end, where they showed Jerry and the Pacemakers kind of clapping along. The drummers, I can't tell, he's ironically clapping sort of in this weird, exaggerated way.
I have to tell you, I know what that is. That is a total like Liverpool Beatles-esque, like, we're funny. Like all these bands, because I had films by all these bands. I had the Jerry and the Pacemakers film. I had the Ghost Goes Gear by the Spencer Davis Group, right? I had the Herman's movies. All these bands were like, we've got to be hilarious too. We've got to be, we're representing England. So of course we're like the Goons, and we're also a band. And so to me, I see it and I'm like, that is just nervous Liverpool energy of like, we're just kind of goofballs. Mm-hmm. That was kind of how I took it, because I was like, that's a total John Lennon move.
I can see that, actually. You're right. I hadn't thought of that, because I was trying to figure out, are they taking the piss out of Chuck Berry? Are they being ironic? But actually, you're right. They're just being, this is what we do. We're lovable. We're wacky, lovable lads from Liverpool. I get that.
If we're voting like it's a boxing round, it's like, yeah, Chuck Berry wins. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But they go the distance. It's a split decision.
They do. Well, you mentioned Smokey Robinson and the Miracles.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting performance because they are, like you said, so just going for it, just going for the gold, just throwing everything. When they get to Mickey's Monkey, the amount of like dancing, and everyone in the audience is like doing the dances they are, and it's just at a high pitch. But Smokey Robinson throughout the performances is grabbing his throat, and it's obviously lost his voice. It's cracking a lot.
I didn't catch that. Okay.
Yeah, he's like, Mickey's Monkey, and it's like, and he keeps grabbing, and he grabs. I'm sorry, listeners. I'm sorry if you had to hear me do that.
I like it.
But he's grabbing his throat, and there's certain songs that he really holds it down for, like kind of the slower ones. But any of them that he has to really like shout and get high, it's always like, even in the video store when I'd play it, like people would be like, no retake for this, you know. But again, it doesn't matter because they sell it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, and I usually would catch a thing like that. I guess it's kind of just figured it is what it is. But yeah, I guess it makes sense, right?
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to edit a piece of it right here and drop it in.
Great.
Everybody, here's Smokey Robinson losing his voice.
1, 2, me and you, long the line, come on now. Everybody say long the line right now.
See, there you go.
Right.
Everyone's happy now.
Right. Now we all know. Yeah. I just figured, yeah.
Everyone in this film is young.
Funny you think of that. Everyone in the film is very young. Um, it's I just I'm kind of on a weird Stones bender right now with that with intentional, but I last week saw Cocksucker Blues. They showed it at MoMA
Yes,
here. There's a Robert Frank exhibit, and they showed it at MoMA, which I just seeing that at a classy museum was a nice juxtaposition. But and I'd never seen Cocksucker Blues in a good print before. I'd only seen
I
50th.
haven't either.
It was there, so I got to they showed it for this classy nighttime audience, and then
Yes.
and all the stuff that goes on there. But I guess what I was going to say is that it's 5 years later, and Mick and Keith seem so much older by that point.
Oh, they're old. They're old by that point. They've aged a ton. Well, it's even their performance in this film. I have been on a Stones kick as well,
Mhm.
and was watching their Ed Sullivan performance, and they are not the Stones yet. Like they're doing
Mhm.
I'm a King Bee, and Mick is just standing still, turning his head once in a while and looking at the audience. Nobody's moving, no one's jumping, no one's freaking out.
Mhm.
And I will say this film, I think is the start of Mick being Mick because of how, we'll get to it, but following James Brown, he's talked about it, how
Mhm.
James Brown was really upset that he was not the headliner.
Yeah.
And and you can just see it play
Yeah.
out in this film.
Yeah.
But
We will get to that because there's a lot to say about that, but I know we'll keep it in the sequence. But I know exactly how you feel about that, and I've had different feelings about the James Brown versus Rolling Stones and the TAMI show. I've
me too.
gone back and forth, and this recent show,
Yes.
recent watching, made me rethink it once again. So we'll get to that. It's a close one. It's a toss up in a weird way.
And it's lovely that you actually get to see Darlene Love and the Blossoms sing with Marvin Gaye, who comes out and does 3 songs. It's just, again, I hadn't seen any early footage of Marvin Gaye. This to me was like the earliest footage I'd ever seen of him performing. And he's just looks immaculate. He sings beautifully. He's just so in control, comfortable. And it is the first time where the set changes. They bring down these kind of globes behind him and they change the lighting a bit, which is cool because up to this point you're like, okay, I kind of get how this is set up visually. It looks like high school bleachers behind the band where the dancers can go up and down and they're on platforms. But then all of a sudden it kind of like brings you closer to the audience. It it just isolates the performer alone.
Yeah.
And it's a really lovely, simple visual touch that as a viewer, you're like, oh, they totally know how to play with us here. They totally know what they're doing.
It is amazing. It's really well shot and well staged across the board. And they have that one thing I'm sure you've noticed as well, but I love that the shot they have from behind the bands showing the audience. And you don't see that very often.
No.
We were watching that and realized, oh, the reason it works so well is usually an audience would be dark. You wouldn't see, and you would have, but the audience is really bright. So you're seeing you'll be looking at the backs of various bands, all the bands and shows, and seeing the audience going nuts or rapt attention or doing things and reacting. You don't get to see that very often. I love that because they're, I guess in the throes of the post Ed Sullivan, Beatlemania, blah, 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 audience, I figure they have to, be screaming the whole time and going crazy, and you get to see that in action. That's a funny thing. Usually we'd see shows like that where you see, here's the band, cut away the audience, cut away the band. But here you're seeing, oh, this is what it'd be like if you were the drummer in the band, at the back, seeing the whole thing going down.
Yeah, you can see how little distance there is from like Mick Jagger to a screaming fan is not very far.
Not very far.
Right. And you see the cameras, they don't try to hide what they're doing in terms of, showing like this is the physical space, here's how we're making it. But I do love that the audience members are so essential in terms of the way that they choose to cut to them. Someone on stage will be doing a dance, and then they'll cut to the audience, and they're doing the same dance.
And the Mickey's Monkey, I saw that was that happens. Yeah, it's great.
Or even the hitchhike dance,
right.
which originated on American Bandstand from Marvin Gaye, and he's doing the dance with his thumbs, and you look out, and people know it already. They're like, yeah. But the one thing that freaked me out I don't know why I hadn't picked up on it before, was Hitchhike starts bump, 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 bump. And I immediately was like, all right, there she goes again. Same key.
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and yeah, the Velvet Underground were like, we totally took that.
Well, of course. That couldn't happen by accident. Yeah.
I've listened to it so many times and never was like, oh yeah, the Velvets ripped this.
You never did? Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah.
I think we're both having things where we're like, what was my problem? Like,
Yeah.
why did I pick this up?
Now, you point out a few things, like I said, the Smokey Robinson's throat issue, what I hadn't caught. But no, the Velvets ripping off Marvin Gaye, I think I knew that back in, when I heard that record for the first time. Oh, there it is. That he's, which is so
cool.
Which is so, you and I were talking about earlier, just how you steal things and nobody can tell because you've couches. They just did that. They just said, somehow somebody, Lou or Kev or who, one of them had the idea, let's start the song with Hitchhike for no apparent reason. All right, fine. That's great. That still happens, of course. I mean, we're all still fans of our contemporaries, and I certainly was in '82 when we started out, and still am now. Maybe to a less obsessive degree. Maybe, I don't know. It varies. But at that point, it's amazing how much everybody was picking up on each other in real time and covering each other. That they, that the Beatles would cover Motown songs that came out 6 months earlier. That's crazy.
Isn't it?
Imagine that now. Imagine if if
I know.
Imagine if I don't know if
yeah, Chappell Roan is doing like Charlie XCX. It's like,
I think I was doing Billie Eilish works alphabetically. I think you could kind of make something out of that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Billie Eyelids. I think you got something.
There
going
you go. Yeah, you remember when Nirvana covered "Touch Me, I'm Sick" on their next single?
But at this point on the TAMI Show, they were doing that. It's
Yes.
incredible that they were picking up on things that were happening right then. I recently, I think it was Smokey Robinson has a show on Sirius XM. We're big Soul Town fans in this house. We listen to that channel all the time. He has a show seemingly every hour. I mean, he's for a guy who's like 90 and abused himself over the years. He sounds good and he's a good DJ. But I heard something where he's recently on one of those shows, he was talking about how surprised and touched he was when the Beatles covered "You Really Got a Hold on Me" on the record. It took him, it threw him for a loop. Like, wow, that's. Oh, you know what? It wasn't on his show. It was on that Beatles '64 special.
Okay,
but
right.
He did,
Okay.
That's why he says it on there. But it's, here you are, you're Smokey and you're 22, 23 years old,
Yeah.
and the hottest group has come along and they're covering a song you released last month or whatever. That's wild. And I think the spirit's in the show that they're all sponges. They're all picking up on each other. They're all, and it all fits together somehow, whether you're, Leslie Gore, who's a whole different thing, but you can tell they're all checking that out as well.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, Leslie Gore is 18 years old in this film.
Is she amazing?
It's the first time where somebody just comes out alone, right? And just stands in front.
Mm-hmm.
So much charisma. It's just like looking down the barrel of the camera and just singing these songs to the audience. It is so killer. They have a killer band too, by the way, that's playing all these songs off screen. Like the band that they have, that's the orchestra, the rock orchestra or whatever, are on it. It just sounds great. But yeah, she just bangs through 5 or 6 songs, and she kind of has one of the longest sequences in this film. But she also does something that is one of my favorite things that I just loved. Often at the video store, I would be listening to the film because I was working. I couldn't just stop and watch. She's just like, "It's my party. Thank you. It's cry if I love that she just jams a thank you in there.
That's pro. That's show
totally
business.
Pro.
You gotta pick up on that. Let's both make a pact to do that.
Yeah. Oh my God, that'd be so great. Especially with some of your longer, newer, more experimental work to just exactly. 7 minutes into it. Thank you. They just.
I like that. I'm going with that. Her thing is amazing. How up to that point, you've had all this party stuff. You had the Chuck Berry and during the Pacemakers duel, and you've had the Smokey Robinson Miracles going crazy, and Marvin Gaye doing kind of his very very slick, suave soul thing. And then she is out there alone singing "You Don't Own Me," and it's kind of like, okay, everybody, for somebody who's about to sing "It's My Party," she's gonna sing "Party's over right now. Let's get serious," and it's really heavy how she does. And there's a moment I really like this. I hadn't caught it before, and watching in advance of this show, when her set finishes and Janet Dean comes out and she looks almost kind of shocked. Like there's kind of this weird moment where she's like, oh, we're back to this nonsense again, are we? And she kind of slinks away. It was so heavy. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And you can hear she said, I just completely just tore this place up, and now we gotta these numbskulls are coming out.
Yeah,
again.
and she tore the place up with such a different genre than anything else that we've seen in this film. It's like they're ballads, they're confessional love songs. Yeah, on paper you'd be like, oh, Leslie Gore is coming up, right? And I love those songs, but like, what's that going to be like? Because, when Billy J. Kramer comes on, it definitely stops down. The film stops, right? Leslie Gore is just like, it goes up another level, and it's just like hit after hit. And she's just like, it made me really, like, I didn't own any Leslie Gore records till I had the video store, and I quickly rectified that. So
incredible, just all that, and then the that crazy thing where all of a sudden she's doing Judy Turner Cry, and everybody comes out, and all of a sudden, what's going on now?
Yeah.
Now it's Chuck Berry's grooving out there on stage with everybody's just sort of mixing it up, and what the hell? And,
it's like halftime.
There's halftime. There's Smokey, and there's Jerry, and they're all just kind of like, what is going on here?
Well, and then it stops down again with Jan and Dean. It's kind of the first lull in the film where they get to do two songs, The Little Old Lady from Pasadena and Sidewalk Surfing. We've seen it in Dogtown and Z-Boys, the documentary about skating culture. They use this footage from this film to show how quaint skateboarding was at one point in California culture. I mean, he basically just gets on it and timidly goes towards the camera in slow motion, and then he turns around and goes back away from the camera. And it's like, wow, okay, skateboarding, that's the new craze, and we have a song about it.
Yeah.
But really, it's a very forgettable performance. I mean, do you get anything from this at all?
No, I think we pretty much agreed that Jan and Dean don't do anything for either of us. But it's.
But how weird to follow them with the Beach Boys. It's like, here's the real deal.
Here's the real deal
that created this thing and this language. Yeah, to me, that to me is the weirdest transition in the film.
Yeah.
Here's the real deal, everybody. The Beach Boys.
Right.
We're
exactly,
frauds.
Yeah. It's like, men at work saying, now here's the police. Like, oh, shoot.
Yes.
That may not the best analogy I could think of, but yeah.
No, it's beautiful. I totally get it. You grab the footage where you can, and this is footage that's often in a lot of documentaries and stuff. Dennis is young and beautiful and rocking out on the drums like a maniac.
I could talk about Dennis Wilson for the rest of the show. I mean, it's incredible. Watching him play, if we had it would be fun to say our top 5 stars of this movie, and the people, you're going to say, well, James Brown, of course, and blah, blah, I guess, whatever. I might put Dennis Wilson right near the top. His performance in this is so incredible. And
I would agree with that.
And we were discussing, because I did watch it with the drummer, we were discussing, because watching Dennis Wilson in this movie, you see Keith Moon, you see everything Keith Moon became. And Linda was saying, well, they were influencing each other. I said, I don't think so. I think Dennis Wilson undoubtedly comes first. The Beach Boys precede The Who by several years. And I don't know what Keith Moon was seeing over in England. I don't know what he would have seen as far as on TV or in clips or newsreels, who knows what. But man, it looks like what you're watching Keith Moon up there. That complete, not just because he's wild, certain things he does, unexpected, and he's fantastic. It's incredible.
If I'd not seen this footage, I would have not known that Dennis Wilson was a monster drummer, right?
Yeah.
Like, you listen to the records, and everyone's super talented, but he often didn't get to play on a lot of those either. They're like, we'll get Hal Blaine to play this part, right?
Yeah.
It is like one of the most unhinged performances in the film, but it's holding down the Beach Boys really well. It's not like, oh, he's going off the map and like kind of screwing with their sound. It like they are really a tight unit in this film.
Yeah. and they really are just there playing it. I mean, it's an incredible thing with the Beach Boys to watch, because you hear those records and they're so, I don't know, the harmonies and the parts and the way Brian plays bass is incredible. And like you say, there's probably studio musicians, this wrecking crew playing a lot of stuff on the records, but to watch them recreate that, just the five of them standing there is great. I mean, I love their segment on here is so good.
You're projecting onto this performance a bit with Mike Love. You're like, oh, you lucky bastard.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of brilliance right around you, but you're so lucky you were a cousin.
Yeah.
But then Brian taking the lead on Surfer Girl and playing the bass with his thumb and just singing just so gorgeously.
Yeah.
I was just really glad that was in the film as well, because I was kind of nervous that, like, okay, this is just going to be, the upbeat hits and we won't get a chance to see Brian kind of sing or do his thing.
Yeah. Mike Love takes a lot of oxygen with all his pantomime and every lyric that he sings, which is just incredible.
Yes.
There's not a lyric that goes by that he doesn't have to act out somehow. It's like, oh my God, we get it.
Yeah, we're lucky it wasn't Frere Jacques or something like that, or or London Bridge is falling down. It'd been like, okay, we get it. Yes, yes. But growing up in LA, did you get a sense that something like the Beach Boys was just like, this happened here, like where I'm from?
Not as a preteen. I don't think I had the sense of, growing up, and I was very, I always say I was born at a good time because I was born in 1960, so I turned 4 when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. The soundtrack of my youth was a station called KHJ, which is the soundtrack, speaking of Tarantino, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it was a great station where you would hear all these bands side by side. So I don't think I thought in terms of, oh well, Love and the Beach Boys and the Buffalo Springfield and the Byrds are from here. I just thought there were a bunch of bands. It wasn't until later on. But one of my earliest concert memories, as I said earlier, was seeing the Beach Boys, the second show I ever saw. First was Delaney and Bonnie at Royce Hall at UCLA, and that was a wild first show. But at 11, I saw the Beach Boys at the Santa Monica Civic. And this is on the Surf's Up tour. And Brian's not in the band at that point. He's just, writing, producing. And I remember this, and I'm 11 years old, so I can't fully grasp what this all means. But I remember on the encore, one of them, maybe it was Carl Wilson, one saying, hey, our brother Brian's here tonight. Maybe we can get him out on the stage with us. And the audience going nuts. I remember this vividly. All this cheering and hooting and hollering, and then nothing happens. And Brian doesn't come out. And they go, okay. And they went on. I remember just feeling that and being maybe too young to fully understand or not knowing my rock history, but feeling like something just happened. It's really sad, and it was, you got to figure Brian just came down from his sandbox or whatever and said he might come out and said, no thanks.
Yeah, it was close.
Yeah, close. Yeah, we were all ready for it. At that point, there wasn't a sense to me of a local scene. Because bear in mind, when you're 11, you're not going out to the Whiskey A Go-Go. You're not going out to the Roxy. I wish I could have, but I couldn't.
You're not like, oh, I missed Love.
Yeah.
When you're, you don't know it yet.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know it yet. I mean, I guess at 7, I could have seen the Buffalo Springfield in Love at the Whiskey. It would have been really great. If only I had a fake ID, I could have done that. And a driver's license at 7 with a phone book to sit on in the front seat of the car. I would have been golden.
Yeah, your parents just send you down there with a note wrapped around your neck saying, let him in. He's
let
good.
Him in. He'll be good. He won't drink too much.
Yeah.
None of that. So no, I didn't get, it wasn't until later on. I was very lucky growing up that, I talk about this in the book, I have an older sister, 10 years older than me, who took me to all those early shows from the time I was 9 till when I became 16 and could drive myself to shows. He took me to see, but the shows she would take me to were shows at the Forum or the Civic or the Greek Theater or the Hollywood Bowl, and there'd be bands like Alice Cooper or The Who or Led Zeppelin or Elton John, and all these things were great, but they were just rock bands, just big rock bands on the radio. There wasn't a sense that was from New York, that was from Los Angeles. They were just bands you liked. That's funny.
Amazing.
Yeah. So the Beach Boys, even a band that I liked, I didn't think, oh yeah, they're from Hawthorne, where my father's auto parts store was when I was born. Right. How funny. No, I didn't connect those dots. It's true.
Well, let's get to the most painful part of this film. Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas.
Oh my God.
Were you familiar with this band? Had you heard them? Had you heard these songs?
A bit, because we're all, musicologists in our own way, but it wasn't a band I ever thought about. I never owned a record by them. I gotta say this, when I watched it, I know Little Children because it's it's kind of a on the oldies page.
Creepy.
It's on the oldies. I never really thought about how creepy it is. I kind of heard it in a new way, and I thought, what is he saying? And of course, I immediately look up the lyrics on on the internet. It's the creepiest song, and you can find endless articles about how creepy the song is. What?
Oh yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, he goes, "You saw me kissing your sister, you saw me holding her hand, but if you snitch to your mother, your father won't understand. Now listen to me." And he's basically bribing children to like go away so he can make the moves on their, sister.
Yeah.
But when it first starts out, you can't tell, like, is he trying to like get someone into a van? Like, what's going on?
It
Like,
sounds
it's
like
really,
that. It sounds like
it's
that.
really
Yeah.
like, maybe Manson and his family could have written this at some
Oh
point.
yes, it could have been their theme song.
But it's so weird because I didn't know. This always blows my mind. The Beatles were huge, and they were busy all the time with George Martin. But George Martin was producing this guy, and Lennon and McCartney were writing songs for him. They wrote countless songs for Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. And I'm like, he's just so uninteresting to watch. He's not that interesting to listen to.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it's got a Payola vibe a bit in this part,
Well, I think about you and I are both part of and have both been part of scenes, and you know how, like I think about back in 1984, after the Pasiley Underground thing, but when Americana hit, once again going to our friend Peter who was on the famous cover of Enemy with him, the Americana or whatever they were calling it, and at that point in time in '84 in England, anybody from the U.S. could get a tour. I mean, you'd be hearing about
amazing.
You'd hear about, seriously, literally, a band who could only get Wednesday night third bill at Raji's would be headlining Dingwalls. Like, oh my God, for this 1 year, if you're American and you strap a guitar on, you can get a tour. It was crazy. And you'd hear about these bands say, oh my God, you guys are eating that up? I mean, we laugh at that back home. I'm not saying any specifics. I'm not too, but it would be funny. So, it makes me think about, and the flip side of that, where the other side, where you go somewhere and you talk about, how come you guys aren't into, well, for example, X were largely unknown in Europe. All of us were touring around. You'd say, you guys don't know
Right.
X. I mean, back home, we love X. How come they haven't, even the replacements to some extent? Certain bands wouldn't.
Right.
You'd go there and say, well, I know you like these bands, but you're missing out on the best things we have and stuff like that. So I wonder, in that context, would bands say, oh, trust me, Billy J. Kramer on A Good Night at the Cavern, best thing you've ever seen? Or they would say, oh my God, we got to put up with this guy because I don't know.
Yeah, it's 1996. He's on Geffen. He's grunge now. Like they used to be something else. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
He's ugly kid show,
Yeah. Well, as an Anglophile, I get it. Like, there's periods where I'd see a poster and it would say like, from Birmingham, and you'd go, right? You'd be like, oh, they must be something. Never heard of them.
Sure.
So I get it, but it is on a big stage with legends. So having Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, on the same bill as the Stones is funny. But, again, the audience doesn't seem to mind. They are freaking out and melting for Billy J. Kramer. I'm glad that you also got creeped out by his lyrics of this song, his hit. But yeah, it's a bummer. And I'm glad that people are trying to keep the journalism on this horrible song alive, because it deserves to be buried.
There are a lot of people talking
forever.
about it, and yet at the same time it doesn't, because somebody's got to write the 10 creepiest pop hits of all time, and
Yes.
along with a couple Gary Puckett songs, this might be right up there.
Oh, yes, absolutely, the worst. This is a weird part in the film for me, because you have the fucking Supremes there, right? Doing these amazing songs, but it's the first time where for 2 songs the camera doesn't get close to them. It's all shot really far away, and it drives me crazy, because by the time the third song starts and they're close to Diana Ross emoting, and you can see like how tight her eye makeup is. Even it's that close. It's so emotional and incredible, but I feel like it's one of the few times in the film where it was a directorial misstep for some reason they were focusing on all three from far away.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when it gets up close, the energy just shifts for the film in terms of their songs, which are amazing. You know, they're not like being manically wild as dancers or anything like, you know, like you see with the Miracles, right? It's like their performance. And I do feel like I would have liked to gone in a little more because it's just, the songs are incredible.
They are. And you know, it's funny you say that, because I really picked up on, well, Diana Ross's eye makeup is just fantastic, but also very, you know, mysterious. When they get the closer shot by the end and she opens her eyes wide, it's so stunning. You know, it just hits you that the way she has such charisma and star power, and just simply by widening her eyes, just by widening her eyes in a couple of those shots. Again, if I have to do my 5 favorite things in the film, along with Dennis Wilson, it might be the moments where Diana Ross just gives you the, you know, the wide-eyed, you know, kind of stare, and you're like, oh my God, I just melted. It's incredible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And she's only 20 and already, you know, like Leslie Gore, just like knows how to reach into a camera and pull the audience straight through the lens, which, you know, it was an art. You know, like I said earlier, watching the Stones on Ed Sullivan, Mick Jagger had not figured out how to do that yet. And I feel like in this film, they're getting closer to knowing when to shift the focus from the audience to one of the side cameras. So now it's 1-to-1.
It's funny how all these artists, their catalog hasn't caught up with it. It's still embryonic in their catalog. So the Supremes said, you're not getting, you know, the heavy, you keep me hanging on stuff. You're not getting the, you know, Love Child.
That's a good point.
You're not getting the darker, heavier stuff. With the Stones, you're getting all covers. You know, with you're not getting Ferry Across the Mersey. You know, so it's kind of, I think it's kind of funny how we're seeing all these bands before they really get where they're going. And the Supremes,
that's a really good point.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of, oh yeah, this is, you know, everyone's figuring it out. Everyone's new, right?
Yeah, that's really good point. Yeah, the Supreme, you just watch it and you're like, oh yeah, the Supremes are known and they've been around. You know, it's like, yeah, they were new and they were young
with little happy pop tunes, with little, you know, kind of, you know, Baby Love and what are they saying?
Yeah, they did. When the love light starts shining through his eyes, run, run, run,
and where did our love go?
Yes, exactly.
So all kind of poppy, sweet little songs. They hadn't gone to the real, you know, they would very soon start making these very topical, heavy, piercing songs, which, you know, then you would have wanted to have that close up right there. I think so. Probably, I guess what I'm saying is, for you to say they kind of missed the boat on the shot, I think they're probably still seen as this cute little girl group. You know, it's funny, by the way, because I made the mistake last week of watching that DVD that you have, or the VHS you had on the That Was Rock, with I forget the title is, with the one with the TNT show. I kind of mixed up. The TNT show is similar but different. It's later, right?
Yeah, it had like the Byrds and Ronettes and Donovan, and it's a year later, and everything has already changed.
Everything's already changed. Everything's already
Donovan would not be in this film, right?
No. Yeah, and you wouldn't have. I mean, everything by that point is kind of settled in. This is not settled in yet, which is.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because I mean, the next band, the Barbarians, are like a garage. Like I heard them on the Nuggets comp, right?
Yeah. Multi.
Yeah, Multi. He had a song about him losing his hand.
Which you can see it. I was looking for the hook and you see it for a couple shots. The hook is in this movie.
Yeah, you have to wait for it. You're like, I told
wait for it.
Yeah, I told my wife, I was like, he plays with a hook, his drumstick. And then they show him a bunch and you're like, damn, like his knees covering it or whatever. And then eventually it pans around. Finally. But it is again, it's another thing. Garage rock is new. Mm-hmm. This represents a really rough and tumble, you know, like noisy garage rock element that is not in this film at all, except in this one performance. It's the only band that has one song. I just thought it was interesting that they added this band to this film.
It doesn't fit. I wouldn't have thought that the Barbarians are in that timeline. You know,
totally.
Yeah. That's kind of surprises me because, you know, like, wait a second, that's Yeah, that's later on. That surprised me. That I wonder how that happened. I wonder if just somebody is like, oh yeah, I'm boss in this band. There wasn't a hit. Well, the hit was,
No.
I mean, Are You a Boy or Are You a Girl was kind of a minor hit a couple years later. So yeah, I don't know who, like you're saying with Billy J. Kramers, is somebody doing payola? Is somebody making is the favorite Brian Epstein? If you want to even think about getting the Beatles next year, you're going to put Billy J. Kramer on the show. Okay, okay.
And the
And the
Barbarians.
Barbarians.
It's a twofer. It's a twofer.
It's a
But they're
twofer.
fine. I mean, it's
They're
kind of
fine.
fun to see something, but it definitely isn't as accomplished. Like, I love this song, Hey Little Bird. I've heard plenty of bands cover it. It's a garage classic, but it is definitely, they just don't have it. It kind of feels like when I would watch Hullabaloo episodes and Soupy Sales would be hosting it and he'd be like, here's my son's band, Tony and the Tigers. And you're like, they're fine.
Even though they would become eventually the best rhythm section in rock and roll for
I know, isn't that funny? And Soupy Sales was like, and I'm not saying that they're the greatest band just because they're my sons. And you're like, well, you just did, but
But I'm telling you, there's a guy in Detroit named James Osterberg who's going to do wonders with them. You just wait and see.
That's right. Wait till he's working with
That's right.
Tin Machine.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to love it then. Trust me.
Right. When people think of this film, they think of the last two performances, James Brown and the Fabulous Flames and the Rolling Stones who followed them. There was a big situation basically where James Brown wanted to headline the show. And there's been documentaries about it, like, Mick Jagger talks about it in the James Brown documentary and stuff. But I do really feel like there's something special about having James Brown play before the Stones because you can tell he's like, follow this. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a moment of wasted energy, space, performance, emotion. It is like a masterclass. Like, I watched it with people who had never seen it this week. And when it gets to that part, you kind of can't believe what you're seeing.
Mm.
It's like a perfect storm of brilliance. He just knows he's going to destroy. And he always did. Like, everybody I've talked to, I never got to see him, sadly. But everybody who I talked to even saw him later was like, oh, yeah, it was incredible. Like, he still cared, and wasn't checked out. It was like his time on stage was going to be it. I mean, what is your feeling when you watch this performance, this run from James Brown?
Well, it's funny. I mean, he's incredible. I think once again, Tom, what I was saying a second ago, he had been around. He was right. He had the longest career at that point. He'd been making records and touring since 58, 59. I'm not.
Yeah, around the same time as Chuck Berry. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Chuck Berry goes back. Right. That's true. But he's been around, so he's got his thing down. He's incredible. And I think you always do think about this movie, if you're a music fan, from the James Brown versus Rolling Stones things. And I've seen this like you have a lot of times over the years. And there are times where I feel like, obviously, James Brown is the greatest, is incredible. But he's also doing a thing that he's rehearsed and got down, and he knows what he's doing.
True.
Where the Stones are really endearing because they're just kind of, innocent and having fun and goofy,
Yes.
and I like them both in different ways. The idea that the Stones are going to come out and and show show him who's boss is not going to happen. But there's a moment I forgot which song where Keith gives this kind of little grin. I think he catches the camera for a second. He gives this grin, and it's beautiful. It's just great because it's everything wrapped up in one. It's everything he's going to become. It's the innocence, the excitement. You see everything in that 1 second in his face that's wonderful. So there's two different things. They're both great in their own way. I mean, and James Brown's playing, Please, 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 and Night Train, and and all these classics. Where the Stones are playing Off the Hook, and
Yes.
I'm all right. Like they're not playing the great Stones set. So this is
Off the Hook, which I love.
It's great.
But it's so funny. Like, yeah, already they're like, we'll do Off the Hook. We'll do Time Is on My Side.
That's
It's all
great.
over now. But yeah, it is funny. James Brown does like 5 songs. It's rehearsed. He does the thing where he falls to his knees and they put the cape on him and he throws it off and he like stomps like a toddler and then he goes back like, oh, I can't do it. But I never get tired of it. It's such a good move.
Yeah, it is.
Because he's being such a good actor in it. Like, he looks in pain. He like, it's fake, I just love it. I just love him throwing off the cape over and over again. He does it 5 times, and you're like, every time he falls to his knees, all I can think about is, okay, what kind of surgery did you have at some point for your knees? Because,
right.
He vamps at the end of Night Train with a bunch of dancing. And it's one of my favorite things where he's like doing the thing on one foot and doing splits and jumping back up. And then he just kind of sits on this little tiny stage off to the side.
I love that. I love that moment.
Isn't that cool?
That's great.
And then it's like he's like, I'm done. And that seems really unrehearsed.
I agree. I love that moment.
Like he maybe not thought the camera was on him. Like he was off the stage.
I think you're right.
And he's like, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to do some more. And he comes out and then he's like waving. It's that to me is really exciting. And so then when the Stones come out with their little instruments skipping across, plug them in, they look so tiny at this point, right? Compared to what you've seen. But I do feel like the Stones really do step up. And there's something really exciting about this performance. No, it's not James Brown. It's not the acrobatics. Mick starts doing some really insane moves with like these weird hyper leaps in the air and kind of shaking his foot on one, standing on one foot and shaking. He's kind of doing his version of, I think, what he's just seen.
Yeah.
But what is good about it is, this is a band that like they are starting to understand how to play with the audience. And whether it's Brian Jones just looking beautiful and kind of, smiling and tilting his head, or like you said, that Keith moment, I do think it's a very fun and exciting moment in the Stones' history. And again, like you said, the U.S. has just discovered full on the Beatles, the power of the Beatles. This is the beginning of the Stones starting to ascend into second place. And then it wasn't James Brown versus the Stones. It was Beatles and Stones in the U.S. till the end of time. It's still a conversation.
Still a conversation, yes. And it's in the James Brown Stones thing, it's funny because like you said, Mick went a long ways from the Ed Sullivan show to this. And in this show, this is why I think the Stones hold their own with James Brown. He's figured out that thing that he did forever, how he can just be coy and sexy and cool at the same time, that mix of innocent that he does. And he's got it in this show. And I love watching him he's not giving up any ground. He's not intimidated. And he's also not going to overplay. It would have been really tempting. I know he does his little goofy dances and all that, but there's mostly just looks at the camera and you see the confidence. You see he knows who he is, and it's great.
Yes, he's figured out that the sinister side of the Stones is starting to show.
Yeah.
It's a different look than anyone has given in this film to this point. There's a knowing look of, I have you. Like I have you in my spell.
That's a good point. You're right. Nobody else in this show does it that way. Everybody else is performing in some way. Even James Brown, even Smokey Robinson, even Marvin Gaye.
Absolutely.
And he is somehow doing this thing where I know who I am. I know who you. It's a very knowing thing. I don't have to do anything but be Mick Jagger. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's all he did basically till now.
Till now.
I just saw them last year, and it's like the same thing where it's like, he knows how to command, and just by doing one little move, the audience melts.
That's what I was talking to somebody about. About seeing, again, remember we started off from seeing the TAMI Show and Cocksucker Blues in consecutive nights, and Keith is almost unrecognizable between the two. But there's a Mick thing that kind of never goes away. But Keith is like, wow, this little nerdy guy is the Prince of Darkness 5 years later. All right.
I know we talked about it when we did the Rock and Roll Circus. We're like, only Mick Jagger could pull off a shirt and have like a watercolored Satan painted on him that he's going to wash off, like in half an hour. And you're like, that's cool. Like, we don't expect you to get a tattoo, Mick.
No.
We know.
Yeah.
But you're the devil. We get it. Cool. At the end of every episode, I ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about. So on a scale from 1 second to 1 minute, with 1 second being the lowest and 1 minute being the highest, how many seconds of Mick Jagger looking down the barrel of the camera at you and taking your soul do you give the TAMI Show? 1 second of Mick staring in the camera and stealing your soul to 60 seconds.
60 full seconds, undoubtedly. It never gets old. No,
Yes, absolutely.
I can handle that. And if you would have said Billy J. Kramer, we'd have a different answer. But, but Mick, I'll take all 60.
Thanks so much, Steve. So good to see you.
It's always great to see you.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show is a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!